Simon, you spent the last year around students in Napier University. Is this poll in Buzz magazine reflective of what you've seen?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. This is a trend I picked up on over a year ago. I felt this for the last 2 years. I've written about it, what I call the easy jet generation, the people under 30. Also, we're seeing that the vote's extended to the 16-year-olds, but there is a distinct trend away from what I would call the demographic that was Thatcher's children, who tend to be a bit more pro-independence. But it's very interesting. It hadn't really been touched upon. We got the first poll last November in the Mail on Sunday, but since then, this also backs up the poll, or the trending in the poll at Glasgow University.
Would you say that the Yes campaign are losing the intellectual argument?
Yes, I think quite simply they don't have the answers yet. There is more of an emotional, romantic, mystical appeal. That's how often people vote, and generally in elections and party political, but maybe in the future of your country people want to take a far more realistic, pragmatic approach to this. And they've lost it on currency, they don't know enough of the answers on the EU, and I think a lot of the figures confuse people about oil, about debt, etc., etc. But obviously the SNP haven't done their homework and have been caught out quite a bit.
It was widely assumed, though, that the youth vote would be fertile ground for the SNP. Why do you think that hasn't been the case in these polls?
Well, I've been struck by how pragmatic young people are and students I speak to. Like last week I asked a class how many of them had credit card debt. These are second years, none of them. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the whole class would have probably. But there's a stark reality since the financial crisis. And I am struck they're not today's generation, because they realise that the future is uncertain. So they take a very pragmatic, level-headed. They refer in a disdainful manner to the Braveheart appeal of the campaign. So it doesn't really surprise me. I think it's very interesting, and I think politicians will find it interesting. 600 people roughly polled it. That's a sizable, amount of people to poll. So it does tell you something.
Is there a danger that Better Together will become complacent?
I don't know. I don't think they have been complacent so far. I think they play a very different game from the Yes campaign. They're a lot more defensive in their approach. It's almost, you could say, like a football match, so to speak. And they're letting Yes make the mistake. And they're saying to Yes, come on, show us what you've got. We've already set out our stall. People know what the United Kingdom is, the uncertainty about the future, and the SNP have got. It's a very difficult task for the Nationalists. The Nationalists never actually intended for the referendum to be in 2014. I think in the long term, the decade-long plan they had for bringing it about, a referendum, and ironically, it was their whopping great triumph in 2011 has brought it sooner rather than later, which they would have preferred.
Moving on to the referendum more generally, Lady Thatcher's funeral, of course, tomorrow. Her death seems to have reignited a lot of debate in society. And how do you think this climate has affected, or is going to affect, the referendum?
I don't think it will. I think the Thatcher thing's already fading. You know, Harold Wilson said a week's a long time in politics. That was 30 years ago. Today, I would say a day is a long time in politics. It's amazing how the 24/7 news, social media, it ratchets on very quickly. And this poll, for instance, most of the people who voted in it weren't alive when Thatcher. I think it's more of a media fest. If you looked at the figures as well, viewing figures last week for television, they were quite low, the figures on the Thatcher programmes.
What's your general perception of the coverage as a former media man?
I think the coverage, I was at Dundee University on Friday, and there was a debate, a question time panel, and people were criticising the media. I would criticise more the politicians, because as we alluded to earlier, the SNP don't have a lot of the answers that people are wanting, and Better Together, they have a very different approach to it. They said, come on, let's see what you've got. Whereas the media, in fairness to them, newspapers, television, magazines, online, there is so much debate so far. There's a problem that there'll be a sort of voter fatigue to a certain extent. But undoubtedly it'll ratchet up a lot closer to the time, because it is a historic stage in Scotland's history in the autumn of 2014. But I would not point the finger at the media. It's the politicians who don't have the answers we're looking for.
Simon Pia, thanks very much.
Thank you.